now, right? Yeah, it's going to stay in order. Yep. Welcome, everyone. We'll start this committee of the whole meeting here. We'll call it to order. I will now call this committee of the whole meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. Approval of agenda additions to the agenda, and the recommendation reads that the agenda be amended to allow the delegation of the Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Team, GBCAT, item 7.1.1 to be heard following presentation of item 9.4.1, report CSD 2023-04, Community Climate Action Planning, and prior to the voting being taken, and the agenda be approved as amended. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Colburn and Councillor Day. And I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, the culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen, the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Declaration of pecuniary interest. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest to declare? See none. Announcements. Does any member wish to make an announcement? Seemed to be quiet on that end. Public hearings, we had none. Delegations. Items on the agenda. Any person who wishes to appear before the committee of the whole regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, it's www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. We have deferred the item 9.4.1 to later in the agenda. First item on the agenda to speak is Mr. Bill Turner, the Rail Trail Fences. Welcome, Bill Turner, and you have 15 minutes to speak.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. I just wanted to touch base with council about doing some work on the trail, Don's Trail Fences. We control everything from what I control, but we farm on both sides of the trail, starting at Owen Sound and heading back second concession to roughly where the escarpment starts. In the past, we haven't done anything since COVID, basically. I think the last bit of work we'd done, we had got some wire and some new posts installed, about 40 rod, and it was done on the old rifle range, starting at the escarpment, the old Bartlett farm, and moving east. Looking for some more posts and maybe some wire again. For those of you who are new to it, it's your fence, and you've acknowledged in the past that we were going to do some maintenance, and I basically do the work, and you provide the material.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm looking for direction on the comment from the CEO, Niles, Director of Community Services.
Nice to meet you.
Doesn't sound like it. Oh, there we go. Now it is. So for you, Deputy Chair Pringle, yep, no problem at all. I think Zach and I connected on this one in anticipation of the delegation this evening, and shouldn't be a problem. So can we connect offline? I'll leave you a business card or something along those sorts of lines. We'll connect and figure something out.
Just what I wanted to hear. Great stuff.
That's good. Thanks, Bill, for stopping in. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Back inside.
All right, so moving on to correspondence. The Owen Sound Chamber of Commerce membership invitation. We are going to talk about the membership that's provided all of us to read in the agenda. I'm looking for comments from staff or from council members. Yep, Councillor Coburn.
Making the assumption that we all reviewed that material that was circulated, I would like to make a motion that council approves membership at category 2 with the Owen Sound and District Chamber of Commerce for 1 year commencing May 1st, 2023.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Councillor Day.
As a new counselor, I'm just curious about the history of whether or not we've been a member in the past and if it was beneficial or not to anyone who knows.
Councillor Colburn.
Yeah, you're
Oh,
right.
sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. My bad. I'll take it.
That's
Anita.
okay. I will second that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Council. Yes, call the vote.
No.
Oh,
No.
just call seconder.
Discussion.
Sorry.
We have discussion.
Thank you.
So I'm making it more confusing. Sorry, Grant. So we were members in the past, and then last term of council, we decided not to be members. Sue and I met with the some of the staff and a board member of the Chamber of Commerce last week, I want to say, because they were interested in telling us what they have to offer. They want to support our businesses. They want to highlight our businesses in some of their materials and presentations. And of course, they always offer to do the all candidates meeting prior to the election, which in itself is probably worth the $275 or $90 that we spend. I'd like to see us do more for the businesses in our area, and I think this is a start.
Thanks for those comments. Councillor Day.
I was also thinking that it might be a show of good faith to keep building a relationship with Owen Sound. We have that ongoing Potawatomi water issue, and the more we work with them, the more hopefully they'll be willing to work with us.
Hear that, Mayor Carlton.
Thank you. I would add to that normally the rate that you pay is based on the total number of employees, and they are allowing that since our outside workers are probably not going to make use of anything to do with the Chamber of Commerce, that we can pay at that lower rate of 6 to 10 employees is what they're allowing us in at.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think also it's a good idea for us to be a part of their, we are neighbors and we all going to work together, and any kind of promotion we can get for our townships, a positive. So anybody else comments? Not seeing any. Carly, you kind of gave me a draft motion here. Their suggestion is a different number than what's on here. Okay, so we'll go with the motion that has been presented to us here. All those in favor of that? And that is carried. Great, thank you. All right, staff reports. We're moving on to the Treasury. We have 9.1.1 FIN 2023.04 Owen Sound Septic Services Agreement. And the recommendation goes as follows. Bear with me, it's fairly long. Whereas the Township of Georgian Bluff passes the bylaw 95/2008, being a bylaw to authorize a sewage wastewater collection agreement with Owen Sound Septic Service, and whereas the Township of Georgian Bluff has received a written request from the Owen Sound Septic Service to increase a cost from 2.6 cents per gallon to 3.6 cents per gallon for all sewage wastewater collected from the Class 5 sewage systems or wastewater holding tanks of the owners, and whereas council by resolution may change the sum to be paid to the Owen Sound Septic Service in accordance with bylaw 95/2008. Now therefore council authorizes a rate of 3.6 cents per gallon for the collection of sewage wastewater to be effective May 1st, 2023, and the annual cost of living increase as per the Ontario All Goods Consumer Price Index for the year to come into effect January 1st of each subsequent year. I need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Carlton, Councillor Scholdice. Any discussion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, the planning report, heritage designation update report. The recommendation is that council receive report PL 2023.20 heritage designations update report for information. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Colburn, Councillor Day. Discussion on the recommendation. Councillor Day.
Again, I have a history question through you to anyone who knows if there was demand from ratepayers or constituents for heritage property designations, or if it was sort of a rote thing that had to happen within municipality. I haven't heard much from constituents about heritage buildings, but I'd be very curious to hear from other folks whether or not they have.
Jen, can you speak to this report? Jen Burnett?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The history behind this report comes from a direction from council to further investigate heritage designations in the township. We did have a couple of property owners inquiring about heritage designations, as well as when oftentimes when a property changes hands, we have the request from the lawyers completing those transactions are also looking to see whether or not there's any heritage register or heritage designations on those subject lands. So the direction came from council, and we had former planning students provide information reports, and then there was an additional direction from council with the report that was presented in 2021 to come back with an update report with an overview of whether or not there's heritage potential within the township. So I will let Ben present the findings of his investigation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jen, for that. So heritage designations are a way of recognizing a property that provides historical value and or a significance to the community as per the Ontario Heritage Act. So the Ontario Heritage Act guides heritage in Ontario. The Act allows essentially municipalities to create a heritage registry to protect properties that are of historical significance. The Heritage Register would both consist of listed and designated properties. So listed properties, what a listing does is it provides the site that is acknowledged to have cultural and or heritage value protection for the meantime, and it requires property owners of that site to provide 60 days notice of their intention to demolish or remove a building from the site. So what that does is it provides the Heritage Committee a time frame to propose a designation on the site. So the designation would require approval from the council to demolish or remove the structure from the site. So designations just provide a little bit more protection. However, listing is just an easier process at the beginning. I'm sure you guys have heard of Bill 23. So recently the provincial government has passed Bill 23. And Bill 23 identifies heritage value is an expansive process, and listing it. Some municipalities have protected listed properties from development for decades by just listing them as heritage. Now listing, instead of designating, cannot be seen as a permanent affordable solution as per Bill 23. So home builders have identified within Bill 23 that listing it is a roadblock, as municipalities have been listing instead of designating properties for a long period of time. So they're looking, as Bill 23 proposes, is that if listings aren't designated within a period of 2 years, they will not be able to be re-added to the register for a period of 5 years, therefore leaving them open for development potential and risking their heritage preservation. Additionally, with Bill 23, it has also made it more difficult for property to be designated as designated heritage property. Prior to Bill 23, heritage planning and the committee would follow 09, 06, and only required a property to meet one heritage criteria for a designation, and only required a statement of why the property is believed to be historically significant in order to be listed. Amendments under Ontario Regulation 569-22 now require any property being considered for heritage designation to meet 2 of the criteria for designation, and it must meet 1 of the criteria for listing. So staff findings. So the staff findings from the original recommendation is, at the time of presentation, staff have collected 20 potential properties that are believed to meet the criteria for designation, and there's 1 property that is believed to meet the requirements of being listed on the register. Properties identified for potential designation under the Ontario Heritage Act require a more in-depth study by a qualified heritage professional and or a heritage committee. At this time, the roster is not being released to the as the previous direction of council was to outline a potential process for next steps and to identify the number of potential properties within the township. Before publishing the roster of distinct properties, the township needs to undertake work to establish the process, policies, and outline consultation steps. So into the financial impact, there are no direct financial impacts from receiving this report. If council does not proceed with heritage designations and a heritage designation registry, there would be no future financial implications. However, proceeding with a heritage designation will have an undetermined financial impact for the township. There will be financial impacts associated with allocating staff and hiring an external consultant to write the bylaw to permit heritage designation within the municipality. The heritage consultant would also be required to write an official plan amendment to incorporate the heritage policy, as well as to write a term of reference for the heritage committee. The total cost is also dependent on if the number of properties that receives designation, as well as if the heritage committee receives per diem compensation. And again, staff resources would also be required in addition to the consultant. As a result, an estimate of the needed personnel to proceed with heritage designations has been developed. First, planning staff would be needed to act as a liaison between the public, municipality, and the Municipal Heritage Committee. The Corporate Services Department would be needed to create a digital database of listed and designated properties on the township's website as of July 1st, 2023, and will be needed to work with the Heritage Committee in regard to its agenda. Building staff would also be required to perform annual inspections on heritage properties to determine compliance with the Heritage Preservation and Maintenance Agreement. The financial impact and resources take into consideration the cost of staff needed for heritage designations from surrounding municipalities, as well as the cost of that is referenced in PL 2021-44 Heritage Designations Report or Information Report. So into the business plan. Implementation of this new business program and impact to staffing resources should be incorporated into an annual business planning process and should include background and foundational work. First, council should consider hosting a community engagement event, as it will allow the municipality and staff to engage with the community and gauge if there is interest in implementing heritage designations within Georgian Bluffs. This consultation process would require additional internal and external resources, and if there is direction to proceed with heritage designation program, a consultant would have to be engaged to write the bylaw, terms of reference, and official plan amendment. Then council would need to pass the bylaw to permit a heritage designation and heritage committee within the municipality. And then this would align with strategic priorities, as community engagement would align with the transparency goals defined in the township's 2020 to 2024 strategic plan. Public participation increases the level of transparency in regarding to how decisions are made. So a conclusion, proceeding with heritage designation program would be challenging for the township at this time for several reasons. First, the initial setup with associating and establishing an official heritage designation registry. Consultants would be needed for most of the work, as the township currently does not have the staff that could be associated and dedicated to the project. The process of adding a new line of business and considering associated and financial human resources should be referred to for a future annual business planning process. Additionally, with Bill 23 recently receiving royal assent, new challenges have arisen. The recent changes would be labor-intensive and costly for the township. A heritage professional then would be selected to write the bylaw, terms of reference, and official plan amendment, and be asked to review the properties staff have currently gathered. Public input is additionally key to gain project support. So hosting public future meetings would be beneficial, whether in person and or online. These meetings would be informative for council to gauge whether the project would get the required community support that is needed. Additionally, the township strategic plan encourages increased transparency outlined in the township's 2020 to 2024 strategic plan. Public participation increases the level of transparency regarding on how planning decisions are made. The findings in this report have spoken to the extensive time and resources needed to complete this process of creating a municipal heritage register. Council's direction should consider the current level of interest for a municipal heritage registry within Georgian Bluffs, to the costs, resources, and required staff allocation to implement the municipal heritage registry. This cost must be weighed against the benefit gained for the community, as many of these properties are located down long country rural driveways, far off main roads, or down some almost a kilometer in length. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ben. That was a great report that you put together there with Jen. So
thank you.
Very good. Any questions from council? Councillor Day.
I have two questions, maybe both through you to the staff, but maybe someone on council can also answer them. I'm still not clear about which constituents were interested in having the heritage designations, and if the properties that inspired them are still standing. And the last part is if they are aware that this topic is being discussed in this meeting tonight.
Thank you for your questions. Jen or Ben, can you speak to that?
I can, thank you. We don't typically identify the individuals who have made the queries. They were not specifically notified that this report was coming to council. It's been a number of years since the property owner spoke to one of the council members, who then brought it up at a council meeting. So as I noted before, the direction came from council to undertake this research. And Councillor Day, if you would like, we can provide you with the meeting minutes, just to provide you with a little bit more background, if that would help.
I've been asking constituents what they feel about this topic, and so far nobody has spoken up and has requested it, but I've only been asking for a few days, so I don't feel like I have enough information to understand our community's current level of interest. I also fully understand the staffing and financial constraints, so I just would benefit from a little bit more information before casting a vote.
Thank you for that. CAO Fletcher.
Yeah, and through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I think this is an example where council members are sometimes approached with an idea or a topic, and they bring it forward to staff and say, hey, can you look further into this, and bring back a report that provides some information. And so it's not really a topic that was sort of, as Ms. Burnett has said, it was initiated by a council member proposing direction to staff. It's not really that the community groundswell was saying we need to do this work. I think what Ms. Burnett and our planning student have done is brought you an update report. And my strong recommendation is, even if you wanted to consider this, folks, this has a huge business plan impact. This is a whole new business line body of work. So if you want us to go further into what it would take to implement, my recommendation would be refer it to a future business planning process where you can look at it in the context of everything else that we've got to do. And I think the report speaks to, we're not sure what the uptake would be in our community, and that would be part of a process in order to develop a heritage designation program, is understanding what the uptake would be in our community. Thank you.
Mayor Carlton.
I think the other thing to note on this is that under Bill 23, it changes how heritage designations are handled, and it would become a far more kind of intense criteria to meet to be able to have that heritage designation. In my experience in talking to people, I don't think there's many in the municipality are interested in having their properties designated in this way. So our recommendation here really just says to receive this as information. So we're not making any movement forward on it. We would just receive the information. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Colburn.
And thank you as well. I'll add my voice to the thanks for the report, Ben and Jen. I appreciate it. It was comprehensive and informative. I don't support jumping into a heritage designation program at this time, but there are other things that we can do that don't cost money necessarily or take up a lot of time. Some other smaller municipalities simply have recognition programs. So they have a committee, community committee with a couple of council members. And what they do is maybe start by identifying the heritage churches and heritage schools in the area, and then branch out from there. And simply all that would mean is perhaps developing a plaque that could go on that building to help with tourism, to show some pride in some of our buildings. And I think that's the kind of thing that we can do that doesn't go sort of down the designation process route. And I would add that I think there is a lot of interest in protecting our heritage buildings. I don't know that there's a lot of interest in the designation program because I don't think people understand it that well. And there's some fear associated with it. But I'd be willing to bet that community members are interested in the kind of committee that might have a recognition program for some of these sites. So that would be my recognition rather than throwing the entire baby out with the bathwater. I would like us to think of some other way to recognize the heritage features of our communities.
Well, thank you for that. Some good comments. Anybody else got comments? Good. I haven't seen any. Direction on this for Carly. Do we want to move something forward? CAO Fletcher, you got something?
I think you're being asked to receive the report for information.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Nope. Very good on that. So yes, we are to receive the report for information there, and I will call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to 9.2.2, the Farm Business Operations Policy Review information. And the recommendation is that report PL 2023.18 regarding Farm Business Operations Policy Review be reviewed for information. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Winters. And I do believe that Priya Prasad, the student, is going to speak to this. And you may go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick technical question. May I share my screen so that I can have the presentation? Share. Is everyone able to view this presentation?
Yeah, we can see it there.
Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Priya Prasad, and I would like to present a policy review I conducted on farm business operations within the township of Georgian Bluffs. So just as a quick overview, we will look at the project description tonight, explore the context of farm businesses within the township, and then I'd like to present key findings from the policy review on relevant policies that I looked at. So to begin with the project itself, it was in alignment with the township's strategic plan, which seeks to review planning policies to encourage farm business operations. So this project was conducted in the span of 3 months as a placement student, and the hopes is to provide information to council so that they can use it as a reference in the future when they make decisions. Before we can assess for policy opportunities, we actually need to look at the context of the businesses within the township. So here I've included some key findings from Statistic Canada's Census of Agriculture 2021. If you see here, the total number of farms was 228 in the year. This number of farms is declining, as is seen across the rest of the province. There was over 60,000 acres of farmland in the township that was in use. 61% of that was for cash crops. Most of the farms are in the livestock, dairy, or cash crop industry. With regards to farmland size, they primarily fell between the 10 to 129 acre distribution. In the past 10 years, since the 2011 Census of Agriculture, the number of large-sized farms is actually decreasing, while the number of small-sized farms is increasing. All the farm business operations were considered a small business in the township because they had less than 10 paid employees. There was only one farm who had over 20 paid employees, and it was for a cash crop. So these are just some examples that I provided of farm businesses within the township. These are some unique ones. I included Snowy Creek Bison Farm, who raise free-range bison. Regal Point Elk Farm raises free-range elk. There's also plenty of horse riding businesses, including Aisling Farms and Glendale Farms, who offer riding classes. And then the township also has unique agritourism farm businesses. For example, Farm on the Lake offers tourists the opportunity to spend the day with goats. And then there's also Dual Acres, who offer horse sleigh and wagon rides throughout their scenic property. Some farm business operations I've included here actually found a unique opportunity to use their farmland as a resource for their professional business. So for example, Serendipity Flower Farm grows all of their florals they use in their flower arrangements that they sell for weddings and ceremonies. And then Stone Grove Farm and Wellness Studio actually provides registered massage therapy and yoga retreats on their property. So moving on to the significance. Overall, farm businesses within the township are significant in terms of their economic value. As you can see here in 2021, the total farm capital was valued at over 621 million. So that's quite a lot. The gross farm receipts for 2016, it was over 58 million. This is the most recent data set. I believe the next data set is coming out in 2023, and that is expected to increase, as seen across many municipalities in the province of Ontario. These farm businesses also support the local economy through the creation of jobs that support farming operations. So think of things like inputs from fuel to feed and equipment, and then also industries like the transportation sector and the tourism sector are enhanced by a lot of the farm business operations. They also provide food security to the local context, which is especially relevant during the pandemic when we saw global food chains were being affected. And then lastly, farm businesses are important for the preservation of natural land for future generations. So while farm businesses have a significant role within the township, they do face several challenges like market volatility, pests and disease, and also challenges from just global events. But despite these challenges, farm businesses were demonstrating their resilience as seen during the pandemic when they adapted their farm operations. They adopted new technologies like GPS and GIS technologies. They found innovative ways to connect with consumers as well. So the aim of this policy review that I've provided is to highlight opportunities for the township to further support farm business operations and help them be resilient and adaptable. So moving into the key relevant policies and key findings, these were the core policies that were reviewed. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'll only highlight the key points of interest, but you may refer to the attached report for further information. Beginning with the PPS, farm businesses typically existed on prime agricultural and rural lands. In 2016, the province created the guidelines of permitted uses on Ontario's prime agricultural lands to really provide clarity on the types of uses that are permitted. So this was an interesting shift from the 2005 PPS and the 2014 PPS as agricultural policies were updated to better reflect rural municipalities and also their need to diversify the rural economy. So we saw terms like agricultural uses, agricultural related uses, and on-farm diversified uses being introduced. The 2020 PPS also added that municipalities should take an agricultural systems approach, which is particularly important for farm businesses because this is the province encouraging municipalities to create a supportive environment and the infrastructure to help these businesses thrive. So to clarify some of these terms, I've included examples. This is agricultural uses. They are the typical farming operations that you think of, such as growing crops, livestock, greenhouses, or aquaculture. It also includes buildings and structures that are related to these operations, so barns and storage structures. And these uses are permitted without size restrictions. Here are examples of agricultural related uses. These are farm-related commercial and industrial examples. So think of facilities that support the agricultural operation. So this could include things like farm produce stands, distribution units, input suppliers. An example might be like a flour mill or repair shops. And these are also permitted on prime agricultural and rural lands without size restrictions. Then we have the on-farm diversified uses. These uses are fairly new and they're meant to be secondary to primary agricultural uses. So think of the floral shop or the massage therapy and yoga retreat example that I provided, and these are supposed to be secondary, so they only are permitted with size restrictions and limitations. So the township also has lands designated under the Niagara Escarpment Plan. Part 2 was of particular interest because they contain the agricultural policies that pertain to farm businesses. In 2017, the Niagara Escarpment Plan added the terms agricultural related and on-farm diversified uses. At the present moment, it's important to note that there are proposed amendments that are being put forward to the Niagara Escarpment Plan, and this is really to expand permitted uses outside of prime agricultural areas and within natural heritage features where there are no other alternatives. And this will particularly benefit municipalities like Grey County who do not have prime agricultural mapping. Again, these highlights the shift towards supporting farm business operations and diversifying their business opportunities. Looking at the County Grey official plan, I found that Section 5 really pertained to farm business operations. And again, the terms agricultural uses, agricultural related uses, and on-farm diversified uses were defined and clarified within the official plan. The on-farm diversified uses in particular, since they come with size restrictions, was outlined in Table 8 of the County of Grey official plan. And again, there are amendments that are being proposed that are important to note. The next slide actually shows the new proposed table for the size restrictions of on-farm diversified uses. Before the minimum farm size had to be 20 hectares. So this shift is really showing that on-farm diversified uses is being extended as an opportunity to smaller farms within the county. With regards to the township official plan, they highlight the need to preserve agricultural land and rural lifestyles while also enhancing business opportunities. Development and permitted uses were deferred to the Grey County official plan to really reduce redundancy. And then I analyzed the Township of Georgian Bluffs zoning bylaws. So as we've spoken about the concept of agricultural related uses and on-farm diversified uses in the provincial and county policies, it's important to note that it is still relatively new to a lot of municipalities, and they're still in the process of incorporating them into their zoning bylaws. So when I took a look at the township zoning bylaws, I found that agricultural related uses and on-farm diversified uses were not clearly defined or adequately addressed, especially when you look at Section 8, which pertains to the zoning bylaws for agricultural and rural lands where most farm businesses exist. Some of the uses were included, but they weren't provided in a concise manner. So for example, like we saw in the County of Grey official plan, on-farm diversified uses are supposed to be limited in size and scale, but because they are secondary to the primary use, but this wasn't clearly present in the zoning bylaws. So addressing these gaps will be critical to support farm business operations, given the changing agricultural landscape and changing rural economies. These findings actually highlight several opportunities for the township to consider to support farm operations. So, for example, you could use zoning bylaws as an opportunity to support agricultural related uses and on-farm diversified uses. Site plan control can complement zoning bylaw requirements for these uses, while financial incentives under a community improvement plan can actually really encourage private investment. You saw the example that I've provided here is the Township of King, who introduced a grant to promote investment in agritourism, farm produce stands, and community cafes within different parts of the municipality. So to wrap it up with a few concluding remarks, I just want to highlight that farm business operations play a significant role for the township, especially in terms of the local economy. The policy changes at the provincial and county level indicate that the importance of agricultural uses and agricultural related uses and on-farm diversified uses are reflecting a change in the rural economy. And then also the township has an opportunity to support farm businesses through zoning bylaws, community improvement plans, or site plan control measures. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Priya, for that very thorough report. It was a lot of information that you provided with us there for sure. Any discussion, comments from council? Councillor Day.
Thank you. I wanted to take a minute. I didn't thank Ben adequately for his presentation if he's still on there. And Priya, thank you so much. I also wanted to thank our staff for having student planners on board. I think that's a wonderful idea to encourage young folks to come back to our area someday and just help students develop their lives. I will miss the elk when they go in Oxenden. Farms are quite important around here. And I just wanted to confirm with me, perhaps Councillor Coburn or staff, that our upcoming community improvement plan committee will consider these two agriculture related uses and on-farm diversified uses as things to add to our plan.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I can confirm that we will be forwarding this report to both the work around our official plan and subsequent zoning bylaw update and the community improvement plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further? Oh, Councillor Coburn.
Thank you. And I would just note further, and thank you, Councillor Day, for encouraging us to have some actionable items from these discussions rather than just accepting these reports as information. I sometimes find that a bit discouraging with all the work that's gone into it, that sometimes they fall by the wayside. One of the statements that the report makes is that the township is encouraged to undertake a mapping exercise to capture missing information and better represent farm business operations in the area. I know we talk a lot about future financial and resources and financial impacts. There are college and university students that do this work for municipalities. Fanshawe is one of them. I wonder if we could at some point maybe turn our heads to some more economical ways of getting some of this work done. Because I think it's important. It's important to our farming community, and it should be important to us as well. So I don't think the high-priced consultants need to be hired to do work for everything. I think sometimes students can do that for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Some good comments, sir. Anybody else? Good comments, questions? No, thank you, Priya, for that. It was a great presentation. There was a lot of information for us there, so that was good. I'm going to call the vote to receive this for information. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next one, background information for the secondary plan for East Linton. Recommendation is that report PL 2023.19, background information for the secondary plan for East Linton, be received for information. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Scholdice, and I do believe Zane is going to present this one. It's all yours, Zane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just share my screen briefly. All right. Perfect. All right. Apologies, just setting up some technical work. All right. Perfect. Okay. Apologies for that. Good afternoon, Council. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Zain Awaja, and I am a student planner at the Township conducting research on secondary plans. In today's meeting, I will be presenting my findings on background information for your secondary plan for East Linton. So my presentation for a potential secondary plan will consist of three main parts. Part one will be outlining general background information. Part two will be examining a potential process, and part three will be exploring potentially required resources for a plan. So part one, the background information. On the slide, a map of the East Linton secondary settlement area has been provided from the County of Grey official plan, showing the settlement area's boundaries and land uses, with the settlement area in orange. So moving on, what exactly are secondary plans? The township may need to prepare a secondary plan for the East Linton area to ensure balanced development occurs. As such, secondary plans often contain the following properties. They guide land use in a certain area of a municipality by providing policies of greater detail than those found in municipal-wide official plans. They are often used in undeveloped areas where significant growth may occur. They are prepared as amendments to municipal and county or regional official plans. And finally, they are adopted at the municipal level and are approved by the government, the county, or the region. So to inform the preparation of this presentation and the accompanying report, a list of 10 case studies of existing secondary plans were examined. The 10 plans and the municipalities they are located within are found on this slide, and they include municipalities throughout the GTHA, as well as other municipalities such as Ottawa, Brighton, Guelph, and one municipality in Grey County, which is the town of Hanover. So part 2, the overview of the process. So in general, findings from the 10 case studies indicate that secondary plans are very often prepared in phases. As such, the following is an example of what a typical process for a plan may look like. So the project initiation, or as I like to call phase 0, could include council perhaps directing planning staff to begin work on the plan and the development of terms of reference. Phase 1 then would include a background review for the potential plan, the establishment of working and technical groups/committees, the first round of community consultation, and the retaining of planning consultants. Moving on, phase 2 would include the preparation and completion of technical studies by consultants, the preparation of a draft plan, and the second round of public consultation. And finally, ending off at phase 3, which could include the preparation of a final plan, the third round of public consultation, as well as statutory public meetings, which are prescribed in the Planning Act, the adoption of the final plan by Township Council, and finally, the various amendments and approvals needed for a plan's implementation, which will be explored in more detail in the next slide. So for the amendments and approvals, so picking up at the, apologies, the slides are a bit delayed. Picking up at the end of phase 3 in the last slide, a final plan would have to undergo various approvals and amendments in order for it to be implemented. The steps for such are as follows. The first step would be the adoption of a final plan by Township Council. The second steps would involve the amendments to both the townships and counties' official plans. The third step would be the approval of both amendments by the Grey County. And finally, this would lead to step 4, where the plan would finally come into effect. And finally, the last part for this, or the second last part for this section would be the timeline. So essentially, after examining the 10 case studies, it was estimated that a secondary plan would require an overall delivery time of potentially approximately 3 to 4 years, given the smaller size of the township's planning department when compared to those of the other municipalities examined. However, this time estimate does not include delays and adverse events, such as subsequent appeals of a plan to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Furthermore, as previously mentioned, a secondary plan is best executed through a phased process. This allows for work to be more easily balanced and for short-term goals to be set and achieved. Findings from the 10 case studies indicate that the timings for phases can vary noticeably. Earlier phases are often shorter and require around 1 year or less to complete, while later phases are often longer and often require a year or more to complete. And the final section for part 2 involves community engagement. So findings from the 10 case studies revealed 6 methods of community engagement: engagement with Indigenous communities, design charrettes, public information centers, open houses, walking tours, and finally statutory public meetings as prescribed in the Planning Act. And now on to the third and final part, part 3, which involves potentially required resources for the preparation of a plan. So essentially, first and foremost would come staff. So first and foremost, township planning staff would lead the development of a plan. And as with many other projects, a project manager would be assigned from its beginning. Staff could have to devote a significant portion of their time to not only technical work, but also to reviewing studies prepared by consultants, conducting public consultation, sitting on working groups and committees, such as a technical strategic advisory committee, I believe, and finally attending meetings with township council and other stakeholders, among other matters. And finally, consultants and collaboration. For the preparation of a secondary plan, the retention of planning, engineering, environmental, and other consultants is often required for the completion of technical studies and community engagement strategies. Furthermore, consultants would also be able to provide more precise details regarding resources, costs, and a more general and fleshed out timeline. Alongside consultants, collaboration may also be required with various public bodies, including but not limited to the Grey County Planning Department, Grey Sauble Conservation, and other municipal departments where necessary. And with that, I reached the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Zane, for that very thorough report. There's a lot of information in there for us to go over. I'm going to turn it over for discussion or comment from council. Oh, Councillor Colbert.
Not to disappoint. Thank you, Chair Pringle. I guess my question through the chair to staff, our CAO, and possibly our senior planner, and Zach, is how does the secondary development plan dovetail, I guess, with the other master plans that we have underway, like the master servicing plan? And I think we were doing a master drainage plan or maybe area specific drainage plans. I guess I'm looking for a status update, especially on the master servicing plan. What's currently being worked on for that? And is that important to have that before we do a secondary development plan, or how do those fit together?
Zane, would you like to comment to that, or Jen?
I'd like to speak to that if I can. So the a secondary plan would result from the findings of the master servicing plan and the stormwater management plan. The servicing plan and the stormwater management plan are going to tell us, give us an indication of what the capacity for development is for that East Linton area. And a secondary plan would then provide more detailed development criteria for developing in that East Linton settlement area. So the secondary plan would be part of the official plan and provide direction both to planning staff and to developers on how the township and its residents want to see that East Linton area further developed. And the servicing plans give us an idea of just what our capacity is for water and what the wastewater treatment plant can accommodate in terms of additional units or servicing for sewer. The right now, the servicing plan, they are calculating the capacity of that wastewater treatment plant. So there are 1,500 units or equivalent residential units that are allocated for development within Cobble Beach. And the documentation shows, I believe there's another 274 units that are allocated for development outside of the Cobble Beach community. The servicing plan is actually looking to verify whether or not there is additional capacity within that wastewater treatment plant. So is it only just 274 additional connections, or can we get more? And would we need additional upgrades to that wastewater treatment plant? This study was undertaken as directed by council. One thing that is important for councils to be aware is that through our agreement with Cobble Beach, the township will be taking over the wastewater treatment at some point. So we want to be prepared in terms and development ready so that we understand the capacity of that plant and how we can maximize the number of connections available so that the plant runs efficiently. I'm not sure, Councillor Coburn, if that answers your questions.
Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. Through you to Jen. It does. Thank you very much. I guess I'm a bit of a stickler for precise numbers. I'm wondering when we're expected to take over that wastewater system from Cobble, and given that timing, are we on track to get these master servicing plans back in a time that will allow us to make some decisions?
Senior Planner, Jen.
Thank you. So I don't remember the threshold within the agreement. I think it might be 400 units, but I'd have to double check and get back to council on that. But what has occurred, I believe in 2019, council at that time signed an agreement to extend the sewer out of Cobble Beach to Churchside Road, and that sewer extension was to facilitate both of the Deerfield Acres subdivision, which is immediately south of Cobble Beach, as well as the Northridge Homes subdivision. So as soon as the sewer extension drawings and funding sources are identified and complete, then the township would be in a position to begin that work. So that's something that staff continue to work on.
Thank you. Yep. Go ahead, Councillor.
Just one last quick statement. We have developers who have been waiting patiently for this work to be done so that we can give them some kind of go-ahead beyond draft approvals. And I think we need to prioritize this if we want our communities to grow in smart and sustainable ways, of course. But if we want them to grow, we need to be able to support that with the appropriate studies and documents made available so we can make the right decisions.
No, great comments, sir. Anybody else got a comment? Councillor Day.
Hello, thank you, Zach, for your comprehensive report. Kathy, I was happy, or Councillor Coburn, I was happy to hear the word sustainable come into the conversation. Growth is important. We have a growing population of people on the planet and in Southern Ontario, and need to make sure there's houses for them. And it's a really interesting conversation to have with the climate action team at the back of the room. And what the developments look like and how they are designed is a very important question that some pieces of it are in this presentation and some pieces aren't here. And I'm curious about how we encourage or incentivize or control some of the features of the buildings and the landscape to ensure that we're working towards that net zero future. Cobble Beach, I know I was looking at their website the other day. I was noticing that they use fescue grass on their properties, which is uses less water, and their lighting is dark sky lighting. So small changes like that can have a big impact on a community and on our municipality. Thank you.
Well, thank you for those comments. Anyone else? Okay, no, that's it. Yeah, the only comment I would make too there was Councillor Coburn actually already had the question answered, was on those two developments that we have draft approvals for out there now. And, obviously these people are likely wanting to move forward. So if we can kind of get those prioritized and get them to the front of the page here and make them go forward. And obviously we need the Cobble Beach piece to be done first to make that happen. So no, that was very good. Great report, Zane. I appreciate all the work you've done to that. I guess we're going to call the vote here to receive this for information. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Before I get into infrastructure and building, I'm going to turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Pringle. And I just wanted to take a moment. Thank you for indulging me. We've had 2 long-serving staff members who have tendered their resignation with the township. And I think it's important we acknowledge their contribution. So last Friday, our deputy chief building official moved on to a great opportunity in Orangeville. Luke was with us for 5 years and had a great contribution to the building division. The other one is Jen Burnett. So Jen is moving on to a new opportunity with Bruce County. And Jen, I waited until after your reports were all done to acknowledge you publicly. But Jen has been the cornerstone of the planning division for the last 13 years. And council, I appreciate the comments about prioritizing things. We cannot continue to be a one-person planning department. So I'll be back to you with a divide and conquer plan and maybe some requests for additional resources so that we can make sure that we support this area. Jen, we wish you all the best, as we do Luke. And Jen is going to be very hard to replace, folks. We're going to do our best to do so, but I wanted to take a moment to publicly acknowledge both people's contribution to this township. So thank you.
Thank you, CAO Fletcher, for those kind words. Yes, yeah, I'll speak on behalf of council here, but yes, Jen and Luke will be missed dearly here. They've done great work for us, and we wish them nothing but the best moving forward. So, yes, all the best. All right, moving on. Infrastructure and buildings. Surplus equipment. Recommendation is that the following items be declared surplus to the needs of the Township of Georgian Bluffs, and that these items be listed on GovDeals to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. Number 1 item is a 13-wheel tow-behind rubber tire gravel compactor. Number 2 is a 300-gallon tar asphalt kettle trailer. Number 3 is a 2002 International Plow Truck, Unit 210. Number 4 is a 2006 International Plow Truck, Unit number 219. Number 5 is 1 V-Plow blade. And number 6 is a straight blade attached for grader. And that all proceeds from the sale of these items be placed in the equipment reserve to fund the purchase of future capital. Need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Scholdice. All right, would like to anybody like to speak to this? Any discussion? Any discussion from council? Mayor Coburn or Mayor Carlson.
Mayor Coburn. Yep, that works.
Sorry.
Just some questions. I guess I can understand the plow trucks that we've replaced them, and so it makes sense that they're declared surplus. Is there any possible reason that some of those, the V-plow blade, the straight blade attachment for the grader, how much value is in those, and is there an advantage to keeping them? And I don't really know that. It's just something that was commented to me about them. And if we're getting minimal dollars for them, is there a reason to maybe keep them on hand for other uses? And I don't know if anybody can actually answer that question for me.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I mean, I can't answer the specifics. I do know that One of the things that staff has been looking at is if things aren't being utilized and there is any value to auctioning them off, it allows us to move to equipment that we are using. I have to admit, I don't know the details of every single piece of equipment on here, but that is really the process that we're trying to use, is if something is obsolete, or I thought if I talked okay, so if we're talking about the V-plow blade, I just got a message that it's no longer able to properly attach to the trucks, and they have a contingency V-plow blade.
Councilor Winters.
Thank you there, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Get it correct. Again, some of the questions and things that I wanted to bring up. The question was whether the V-plow would fit one of the graders. Back about 10 years ago, the township went through a large surplusing process here and dug a bunch of the V-plows out that had trees growing within them. The intent back then was to keep 2 of them, 1 for each grader. There has been a new grader purchased by the municipality, so my question was whether or not it would fit that grader. If it doesn't fit, there's no sense keeping it, but the intent was to have 1 for each grader. The bull blade for the 1 grader, I agree that won't fit the new grader. But while we're on the topic of surplus equipment, I mean, I do have some other things here. We have an excavator that's being replaced this year. I just wonder if this was the time that the old excavator be declared surplus when the new one came in, so it could go through the same process. I do drive by the municipal office and I look at a bunch of vehicles in the parking lot here, and I wonder if the Hyundai admin vehicle is a surplus vehicle as well, should be looked at. And then back in the day, there was a lot of scrap iron description, but it was brought in from a proposed developer of the biodigester. So there's a bunch of scrap steel silos, mixers, conveyors at the Derby shop, as well as in the landfill shop itself, that was brought in case there was an agreement that could be made back in 2019, 2020. I think that ship has sailed, and I think that's time to declare that surplus as well. Free up that space in the shops and get some extra revenue out of that.
I will invite our treasurer to comment. I think, council, we would ask you to look at the list that's in front of you today. If there are other things that you think you might want us to look into, that's fair. In terms of the vehicles out here, 1 is assigned to operations. We need to hire our supervisor. You know that posting has been out. The administrative vehicle is used by a number of different people on a sign-out basis. So for instance, I went to a meeting in Meaford one time and could sign out that vehicle instead of charging mileage. So I'll invite the treasurer to make comment as well.
Go ahead, Sam.
So through you, we do have intentions of this year to do a full asset management reevaluation. So that is where we would find a lot more items to be declared as surplus. This was an initial list that we had at this time. So we were going to try to get some funds. I do fully anticipate and expect a further report will come, as there's even items within this administrative building, such as our old folder and stuffer machine. It has not been declared surplus yet, but it does not work anymore. So we do have to do an asset management and a capital asset review, which will identify, I'm sure, many more items.
Councilor Winters.
Thank you. And actually, that clarified my second point. Was we had, during our original budget deliberations, had asked or been told that there would be a list coming through with all the vehicles listed on it. So I think that's exactly what you're saying as well. So as long as we understand that maybe this is just a start and then there's more to come, I'm good with that. But again, as I mentioned before, time is money and we're paying insurance on this. So the sooner that we can surplus it, the better.
No, good comments. Anyone else? So, I really appreciated the pictures in the report. So my 13-wheeled compactor was totally different in my head than what I saw in the picture. So I appreciated that. So anyway, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, moving on to community services. We have 9.4.1 CSD 2023-04, Community Climate Action Planning. The recommendation is the report CSD 2023-04 be received for information. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Day, Councillor Scholdice, And I will now defer this over to the Director of Community Services, Niles Wilburn.
Oh, look at that. So thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you, Deputy Chair Pringle, for the introduction. I'm not going to talk for very long because there's more important folks to do some of the conversation this evening than myself. But I did want to briefly introduce this topic by saying, this is the first time I think I've walked into a job and had for several different areas of the portfolio that I'm assuming some very active and engaged community members on some of the files that I'm picking up, and this is certainly one of them. So it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm glad so many of the group were able to come out this evening. I know one or two others were unable to attend this evening, but it was a pleasure to step into the role and have such an active community group that was already in place, and a group which inspires you to work and work hard. So you can rest assured that these good folks are making sure that tax dollars are well used and scrutinizing the work that goes on. And so I did want to come in to introduce the group. Obviously, at the beginning of the year, we made some changes to committee structures and so on and so forth. And there was some good conversation around that. And there's also been conversation since I started around what's happening in terms of community and corporate climate action. And so this is an opportunity for the first of what will probably be a whole series of stuff over coming months, providing that sort of update. But it felt like a really good opportunity. And when we met as a group, a good opportunity to come to council and talk about how that work is evolving and the work that's going on. And so I'm delighted to hand the reins, I think, over to Anne to start with. It'll be Luke start. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Niall. That is a wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Luc Zandvliet, and I'm here with a number of members from the Climate Action Committee, John Anderson, Bob Bray, and Ann Snyder. And we have Danuta, who is down with COVID, and she is listening in. We've been talking for a while about presenting to you. Because we are the 5 representatives of the Climate Action Committee from the community. But the Climate Action Committee also had council members, Councillor Coburn and Mayor Carleton. So the 7 of us consisted of the Community Action Committee, and that ceased to exist in its current form towards the end of the last council representation. So we thought it's an opportunity to give you a bit of an update about where we are at the moment. There's a lot of progress has been made since. What we also thought is to give a bit of a background in terms of what the 5 of us are as part of a larger group, because we're not the community members only of the Climate Action Committee. We're representatives of the Climate Action Team. And that's a much larger group consisting of started in 2020. We have monthly meetings. We have about 90 members that are quite actively involved in different activities. And so we give you, if you go to the next slide, I want to give you a bit of an update about who we are, and we promise we keep it short. What we are, also what was what's the climate action process, and then where we're at the moment, and what we think would be recommendations for council. So just briefly about GBCAT. Started, like I said, 2020. What a very active membership, but we do a lot of things other than engaging with the council. We have a few tools, engagement tools. You see a few rugs. That rug, for example, a movie has been made about it, and we use it as an engagement tool to represent the temperatures for each year for the last 150 years. So it is a wonderful tool to actually engage people around. We have a spinning wheel. You see on the slide that we organize public meetings about various topics about the impact of climate on insurance. We had one on Lyme disease and the relations to climate action. We have theaters and the theater production that we organize. One of our members is actually chairing the Earth Day on April 22nd. We do it in collaboration with Owen Sound. So we really hope to see you all there. There's a book club. We engage with kids at school. If we go to the next slide, we see some more ideas that we have. The Greenometer, of course, in collaboration with the council. So it's just to give you an idea that there is a group of people in the community, all Georgian Bluffs, that are very active, very committed, really want to see this move forward. And that is much larger than the 5 of us. And on that note, I would like to hand it over to Anne to give a bit of a background about the Climate Action Committee.
So if we could have the next slide. And just to let you know that kind of starting in about 2020, starting in about 2020 and kind of go over the next year or so, George and Bless was actually perceived as a climate leader. People were saying, how did you do that? How did you move all of this stuff forward? And you can kind of see the timeline of all of the things that George and Bless was involved with. As a council, you folks approved this. And, it was really nice as a constituent to actually feel like I was part of a municipality that was seen as a leader. So thank you to council, the previous council, for doing that. We're going to talk a bit further in terms of where we are now. I know that we had a little bit of a stall over a period of time, and I know that that was related to, I think, some staffing issues, some issues around how we were working with our committee. But I have a feeling that now we're actually moving forward again, and we're moving back into that leadership role, or certainly we're in the potential of moving back to that. If I could have the next slide. Thank you. And that just gives you the who was on the Climate Action Committee historically. And it gives you a bit of a background on the community members. And apologies to Mayor Carleton. You were down as a councillor there, and at that point you're actually deputy mayor, and now you're mayor. So sorry about that. So if we could have the next slide. And I think it's really important for you to be aware that our community members are donating their time, and they're donating the time of people that have well over 100 years of experience living in this municipality and living in it, raising our children in it, and working in it. So we've certainly gotten to know the municipality well, and we're bringing quite a range of skills. And what we hope the council will do is once we have the terms of reference completed for the working group and working with Niall, we hope that you will actually endorse that process and that committee work as part of the active work of the municipality. Next slide, please. And I think actually this is moving on to John.
Thanks, Anne. I'm John Anderson, and we agreed to taking turns on this. So this is just covering, some of you are quite familiar with this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is what climate action entails, and communities that have engaged and gone down this road. There's a mitigation plan, which is attempts to reduce our emissions over time and meet targets, both provincial and federal, but also targets we set for within a municipality itself. And then there's adaptation planning, and that's making changes and adapting to the climate impacts that are already here on us. And so in 1994, when the Partners for Climate Protection program started through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, it was all about mitigation. But now adaptation is becoming much more important because we are all aware of many of the impacts that we're actually getting. And the framework that most municipalities follow and that we're following here is defined by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in partnership with ICLEI Canada. ICLEI, it's a long acronym, but it's basically Solutions for Building Sustainable Communities. It's an international consulting company. They're in over 125 countries around the world. And so FCM and ICLEI work in partnership. And the two programs are the PCP and the BARC. And BARC stands for Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities, which results in sustainability. Each of these programs has 5 milestones. When you join the PCP, which we did in 2020, I think, you set a 10-year clock ticking. You're to report back to the FCM PCP every 2 years. And then in the BARC, once you start with BARC, there are also 5 milestones, and they're different. And as the Venn diagram shows you, there's an intersection set. So many things that you're doing for mitigation, you're also doing for adaptation. But the fact that there are 2 plans in municipalities that are doing this reflects that there are unique things. So that's kind of the framework for climate planning, and that's where we started 2020. And we joined BARC. That was a $20,000 expenditure. It's a one-time cost, and then it gives us access to all their resources, access to their staff. And then we are members of PCP, which you join without any charge. But again, as Niall has been recently working with staff there, they have considerable resources. So nothing's new here. It's just a matter of getting on with this job. And this has been done, as I say, it was started in 1994 when communities started down this climate action plan. Next slide, please. I think we've covered quite a bit of this, but just to make the comment that the previous council was quite supportive of climate action. We put some pretty significant money into this. We didn't spend it all, but more than many other communities are doing, and partly that I think reflects the enthusiasm that was here, and partly it was reflecting that we don't have a huge staff base here, and so you're reaching out to consultants and you're reaching out to partners, and that's how we look at ourselves as partners going forward. And you're probably aware of the timeline we're on. So there is a consultant, Wood Consulting now, WSP, will be tabling a corporate climate action plan, I believe in another month or so, and in June, June of this year. And you'll see there that we've been looking at the draft reports, that it's both mitigation and adaptation. Next slide, please. There. And so where we're really coming from is that we want a community action plan. So we'll have a corporate, but for the many municipalities that have done this, emissions in the corporate sector represent about 1.7 to 2% of the total emissions from a municipal area, with the community representing about 98%. And while those are done with emissions, you can imagine that really reflects the infrastructure, the resources, and those are cars and houses and things that emit carbon. So that without a community action plan, you're really not serving your community. And so that's where we're coming from, and that's where we hope to make some progress. Next slide, please. And then finally, in working with CAO Fletcher and the staff here, because we've been at this for a while, we're very much integrated with Grey County, and we're looking at very much working with Grey County and following their lead. And so, as you know, they have a climate mitigation plan that's in place, and they have an implementation. Actions. There's 21 total actions. What we've listed here are the 8 actions that lower tier municipalities have been identified as the leading organization on. So every one of these is things that we can actually do, following within the county's footsteps, but taking the lead on. You can read through them. These are things that we will be looking at and wanting to make progress on. There's another 9 where lower tier municipalities have been identified as a partner organization. So out of 21 total actions within the county's plan, 19 will involve us or could involve us. And I think that's all I'm going to say. Back to Anne.
So if we could have the next slide, please. Actually, there's one before that. Okay, so recommendations, and I'm just going to quickly go through them. So number 1 is endorse the working group once we've got the terms of reference done. Developing a plan for ongoing climate awareness, because if you can't really take action if people don't understand why they need to take action. And actually, I experienced why we need to take action coming to this meeting today. And I was coming down the Kimball Mountain and was confronted with a sign saying emergency road closure because there's flooding up ahead. And I saw big time flooding. And we're going to see more of that. And that's actually adaptation. We really need to look at how to deal with that kind of stuff. But we need to understand the why of it, and that involves a pretty concerted effort of awareness raising and education at 3 levels. One, people like me, our community members, people like our staff, but also council. I think it's really important to keep you folks also aware of what the issues are and how to take action. The second one is one of the things that I think we kind of lost track of over the first 2 years of the Climate Action Committee was keeping council aware of what was going on. And we had some significant challenges. I don't think the council was aware of that. And so I think as we move forward, it is really important to do regular information sessions. What are our challenges, what are the things we've achieved, where are we going, so that you stay aware of what's happening around this climate portfolio, which really touches everything that I think you're going to take a look at. Doing public engagement is so important, because when we talk about 98% of emissions, it's not corporate emissions, it's from the community. You've got to have that community engaged in the process, because they're going to have to take a look at how they're going to make some changes. So we need to keep them engaged. And when Luke was talking about a lot of the activities that GB CAT did, a lot of what we have done and continue to do is how to do engagement. But I think we could do a much better job of that if we partner with the municipality, because you've got a bigger reach sometimes than what we have. So together, I think we can do a better job of that. Quite read. So in addition to public engagement, we also need to have opportunities for the public to actually have input. I mean, if they're going to need changes, make changes in what they're doing, they have to have input in terms of what that looks like, what the priorities are, which one they do first. So we're going to have to, figure that out, whether it's, I think it's called whack the table or bang the table. Okay, so using that tool, using community forums, but ways of getting community members having input so they actually take ownership of this community climate action plan. It's not something being put on them. They've been part of the development of it. And the budget. Yeah. So we know that there is budget discussions going on. We know that there's still money left over for year 3, and we really appreciate that council is recognizing the importance of that. And we suspect that that will be an ongoing conversation that will need to go on, not just for this year, but for subsequent years. So really appreciative of having that discussion as part of your budget discussions, because it really, to us, shows that you see this as a really important thing that needs to be attended to. For the whole well-being of Georgian Bluffs, this is not just kind of a little piece of what you're looking at. Taking action on climate change affects everything that you're doing. So thank you. Hoping that you have some questions of us. Actually, this is the last slide, and this is an interesting slide, because if you look at the rug over there, which you can only see part of, it actually used the data that John gave me going back to 1880, and it kind of shows the kind of up and down that climate temperature historically has done. And, so there was, a little bit hotter, a little bit colder, and that was normal. But if you look to the right of the graph, I've heard some people call this the hockey stick effect, and it's no longer kind of up and down, it's just going up. And if we don't take action, it'll just keep going up. So our job is to get to that darker line to start leveling off. That's the job. And I know that you've been given a package. The package gives you a very interesting quote from Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, which I hope you will read. It also gives you some really just a primer on climate. But the other piece that I think will be a very much of interest to you as council members is the impact of climate change on the cost of insurance. And as a municipality, I know that's going to hit you as well as me. So please take a look at that.
Well, thank you for that report, everyone in the committee there. It was very detailed and obviously a great passion to the committee that's putting this forward. So I'm going to open it up to the floor to council here to see if anybody had any comments, questions. Councillor Goldberg.
Yeah, I echo my thanks to the committee members and community members that came tonight to enlighten us. From a councillor's perspective and referring to our fiscal responsibility, we had the last term of council committed $150,000 to this effort spread over 3 years. We have hired a consultant to work on the corporate plan. It would be a shame in more ways than one for us to drop the ball on this and not consider it a priority when we talk about budgets, because we have spent a considerable amount already, and let's make sure we have something at the end of the day to show for it that will have the desired impact on our communities.
Thanks for that. Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would just like to thank all of the committee members who have been involved in everything that you have done for the township and moving this forward, because you've brought an expertise to the table that we didn't have and that has seriously helped move us along in this path. So I just want to say thank you to all of you.
Very good. Councillor Day.
I believe you're already educating the community, so I think you're getting well ahead on that goal, and I think you're doing a great job connecting with the youth in Georgian Bluffs as well. And know you're talking to all the grade 10s at OSD who study climate change as part of their science curriculum. I just wanted to add one piece to the conversation in that I've been aware of environmental issues, perhaps from an unusually young age, because my father worked for Parks Canada. And all the things that we were being warned about when I was a child are actually coming true now, which is a really scary thing, but also hopeful, because since I've been teaching about climate change for about 20 years, and when we started, we had parents coming in and saying, climate change isn't real. It's all just a conspiracy. And that doesn't happen anymore. So that is good. What I do see now is climate anxiety in our youth and in adults as well, people who are afraid for their futures and what the world will be like that they live in. So I strongly encourage us as adults to not leave it on the shoulders of our children and the grandchildren to solve the problems, but to address things now, especially given that the scientists are saying we have a window of time right now, a short window of time in which to make change before we go through what David Attenborough calls the one-way doors of irreversible change. So avoiding the more serious consequences of climate change would be wonderful. And the thing that brings me the most hope is to see people taking action in all levels, in schools and on council and in staff, within our staff. So I appreciate everything that CAO Fletcher and Niall and our councillors are doing to keep the climate change conversation happening, and especially our community volunteers.
Thanks for that, Councillor Day. Anyone else? Councillor Winters.
Thank you there, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Got it right. Again, I would like to commend the volunteers in the committee for the work they've done. It's been great. Your work has been recognized out there. It is talked about. I hear it on a regular basis, and helping make Georgian Bluffs one of the leaders. To be, you should be commended for that, right? That's impressive, and I think as councillors, we need to continue moving that momentum forward, right? So again, thank you.
Great comments. Yeah, no, anybody else comment? Just for a final one for myself too, is as mentioned by Mrs. Schneider there, that Georgian Bluffs was a leader in this field, and I got no doubt in my mind that you will be leaders. We have a great group of people here right now with the folks in this committee, and our two on council that are in part of that also. We've got a great wealth of knowledge there, and I expect nothing but the best moving forward. So looking forward to it. I got Councillor Thompson on there for a comment.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to speak too long. I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I think it's This committee is an excellent example of utilizing great volunteers with a wealth of knowledge in the community and putting their energy and intelligence toward a really great cause. And I appreciate that. And I thank you for that.
Great comments, Councillor Thompson. All right, so there's no others. We will call the vote for receive this for information. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to unfinished business. We have nil and new business. Any new business? Oh, looking nil there. Notice of motions. Councillor Coburn.
This is not a notice of motion, but rather a request for an agenda item on the next meeting. If at all possible, I would like council to review our bylaws pertaining to livestock. That could be our zoning bylaw and others. And this is in regards to the issue of backyard chickens, which is not just becoming a thing here. It has been a thing here for a while. We just didn't maybe realize it. But it's also something that several municipalities are dealing with. And even large cities have less restrictive policies around this particular issue. I'm getting too much into the weeds here, so I won't, but I just wanted to request that be added to our agenda for the next meeting.
Perfect, thank you. CEO Fletcher.
Through Deputy Mayor Pringle, I wonder if I could ask for just a bit of concession on the timing to bring that forward. And it really is just a resourcing thing at this point. I think you know that we've had a couple of people leave who would be part of this discussion. And so if I can even have some leeway, I'm certainly willing to bring back information to council. But if I can have a bit of leeway on it not being the next meeting, that's what I would ask for. Thank you.
Councillor Coburn.
I had to start somewhere with the negotiations. Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, we're not serving anyone well if we rush it. And perhaps we're not looking for a ton of information from staff, but rather just to start the discussion and then maybe look to more information down the road. But absolutely. I will trust your judgment in regards to the timing. Are we thinking?
It will be within this quarter.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Again, just a couple of items that I hopefully we can see on a very soon upcoming agenda item is when we started 5.5 months ago, I was always after financial reports and I was told that's a quarterly thing. 5.5 months in, I haven't seen that yet. So I'm hoping that that's coming up very shortly. We talked about action item list couple of months ago as well. And we agreed that would be a quarterly thing as well. I think it's time and imperative that we get that kind of moving forward. And then further to a conversation we had earlier about Cobble Beach, I know there's a couple of old agreements out there, 2019, 2020, maybe 2021. Is it possible that council can get a copy of those agreements so we understand what that sewer extension is about and we can help develop a plan to move that forward to keep everybody happy?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor Pringle, I think we owe council an update on the developments on the east side. Again, I need to assign that to somebody now that we have a vacancy. I know that one of the things I did when I first started was have somebody organize. There are a lot of documents related to the east side development. We're getting those organized in some sort of logical manner. And so absolutely we can provide council with an update. Again, if I can have just a little bit of leeway on the timing, we'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Councillor Coburn.
And I, again, through you, Chair Pringle, I appreciate that we need the time with our staffing resources stretched to the limit. For Councillor Winters' request for financial information, that we're going to need before we look at approving the budget. So I would just echo his request for I want to know how we cashed out at the end of 2022, folks. I want to see the 2022 unaudited year-end financials. I know I've said it before. I need that in order to look at approving a budget for 2023.
Very good.
Through your chair, that information for Q1 of 2023 and the complete 2022, we are still working on your end, but we have more reliable information, but it will be included in the April 24th special budget meeting.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Anything else? We're good there. All right. So now we're going to move into closed session. The committee of the whole move into closed session at 6:40 in the council chambers with the CAO, the acting clerk remaining in the room to discuss a position plan, procedure, critical or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of a municipality or local board, potential property negotiation in the former township of Keppel. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters. And call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. We moved into closed session to discuss matters under the open meeting exception K of section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001. As a result of closed session discussion, direction was provided to staff. Date of our next regular meeting, council will meet as regular scheduled on April the 12th, 2023 at 5 p.m. If there is no other business, I will now call for an adjournment of this meeting. I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Day, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone.
You in a hurry to get out of here tonight, Ryan? Moving on both adjournments?